Today we're going to address one of the stances of Master Kuo Lien Ying's curriculum that many people have a problem with, and that is what we call the falling stance. I know it has a lot of other names. You can call it the side squat stance and snake creeping down. There's many other names for it, but in the early days in Portrait Square, we just kind of generally refer to it as the falling stance, and that's this stance here. In this stance, the feet are about 3 shoulder widths apart, and the main idea is that you get your center of gravity about a third of the way through, so that you're squatting inside of this supporting leg. So it's basically a one-legged squat with an extended leg. In the classical rendition, the ideal position would be to have your back fairly erect, not bent over, and be able to drop down and in and out of it fairly easily. But again, um, it's not a natural stance. I don't think in daily life we use this stance too much. It's pretty much inherent in the Shaolin curriculum. So let's go through a couple of stretching exercises to help you develop this stance. So again, about 3 shoulder widths apart, and just drop down as much as you can. You can only go down that much. That's fine as long as your back is fairly erect. So dropping down until you're, so the problem that people have is two. They either have a problem with their joint mobility, meaning the hips and the flexors, or the knees. And so you want to be careful with it because you don't want to be injuring yourself, because the Kung Fu practice is to maintain health, not to injure yourself. So just do what you can is really the basic rule. So you want to go down until you reach your flexibility maximum. One of the good exercises to develop this falling stance is basically the what I call the Asian squat. And again, a lot of people really have a lot of trouble with actually just doing the squat, and usually come down to two things. One is the flexibility of the ankles, because in order to do the squat, you have to have a certain amount of flexibility in the ankles. And another thing that most people never talk about is actually the joint length of your knee to your ankle versus your thigh, because a lot of people, Asians, tend to have like shorter distance from knee to the leg, and so it's easier to do the squat if your joints are the right length. And if you have a different configuration, like my wife is short-waisted and long legs, and she has a difficult time doing this full squat. When you're in the squat position, you do it both spread and close. And again, in the warm-up video, we did it like this, and I show you how to do by supporting your back, by supporting yourself on the fence. It allows you to sit back more and develop the stance. I think as well, another modification that it's possible to make if you have a difficulty with the stance is to have this rear foot a little further back, right, instead of in line. And I think that might make it a little bit easier because it kind of makes it a little bit more like the bow stance. So if that helps, and in a lot of the transitions, you're going from the falling stance to the bow stance, so having it a little bit back is wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So also for more advanced practitioners, if you're in the slow squatting position, you can practice leaning over so that you feel your full weight on this leg and practice kind of extending that foot out. That's an exercise I like to do. So the question came up because one of our subscribers was practicing the saber form, and this person had a hard time going from the crane stance all the way down into the falling stance. And admittedly, that's a really difficult move because it's like doing a reverse one-legged squat because you're supported totally on this weight of this leg. Now you're having to, without support of this foot, drop all the way down into the falling stance, into the next move. So this person had a difficult time and asked me for suggestions on the way that they can modify this. And this gets into further discussion about if you can't do the form as is prescribed, is it okay to modify the form? And I definitely feel like it is, because the form in our practice is basically your personal kung fu, something that you're working on. And everybody has their own limitations. So within those limitations, you want to continue to do the form. You don't want something as simple as that to stop you from doing the form just because you can't do that one move. In a previous video, we talked about doing the scissors kick and how to modify that, because as we get older, our mobility starts to decline, and we want to continue to do this kung fu through old age. And so even though I can do the falling stance now, there may be some day where I would be more limited in my mobility, or just get old and I can't, not as flexible. So it's always good to think ahead and kind of work around the principle that you want to keep the form intact as much as possible, the kind of intent and flow of the form, yet to be able to change it for your own needs. And so in this case, we talked about how to modify this move. So I had a few suggestions for this person. And in the move, it comes at the end of the opening to here. So you end up in this position here, and you go into the crane. So again, this video is not just about the sword, but it's about how to modify this falling stance position, because it happens in Tai Chi, staff, and all the Shaolin. So for this particular situation that we were talking about, I advise two other ways that she could do it. She could step into a horse and drop down as much as possible, and then complete the move. This person said that they didn't have a problem dropping down when they were on a two-legged stance and going down into the modified falling stance, kind of a semi-falling stance, but it was only from that high crane position, because being supported on one leg and going out, the knee problem prevented that. So again, one of the suggestions was first drop down on a horse, modified falling stance, do the ward off, blade hand, kick, and then a turn. The second suggestion was to come from this position here, step down, and then step back in the falling stance, modified falling stance, ward off, blade hand, kick, and turn. But the third way that I came up with, and this person liked the idea, was to actually eliminate that falling stance because it wasn't really an inherent part of this move. It was just kind of a more kind of a fancy rendition of it. And so there was no reason at all not to eliminate this move within this context. So from this position here, you could go for the ward off, blade hand, kick, and then into this position and carry on. So it wouldn't really be kind of missed that much. So I think that that would be the best rendition if you had a difficulty in doing this falling stance because it continues the inherent flow of the intended move. So it would look like this. Just there's like not a lot of space, so I kind of cut it short a little bit. So again, the modification is okay due to physical limitations. Of course, we always want to try to keep the classical form as much as possible, but if you have to, it's really okay to modify. So again, that modification would be from here, just go into the blade hand, kick, and here. So we're coming up into a move in the saber form that where it's going to be harder to avoid that falling stance because the falling stance is an inherent part of the dalu, the fixed form. So how we'll modify that, this will be an example of where you can't take it out of the form and you just have to modify it within the form. And really, this is a fairly difficult move, the way that it was taught by Master Kuo Lien Ying. Of course, Master Kuo Lien Ying was old school, and if you couldn't do the move, well, you couldn't proceed. That's just the old school thinking. But these days, a lot of the practitioners are getting older and they just want to find a way around it. So that's why I am doing this video. So in this next move, we're pretty much coming up to this move here. It's going to start from the cat stance and you do the wrap and you're going to fall right down into the falling stance and then jump into the falling stance on the other side and then come out of it with your solid move. So you can see that's a pretty difficult move, jumping into the falling stance and then jumping out of that falling stance into the falling stance on the other side. So an example of as I teach these forms, and I always want to think about the many different levels of people that are following me on YouTube trying to learn these forms. I'm always thinking of ways to also give an easier rendition of this so that people can still practice the form even with their physical limitations. So this is what I came up with. So again, from here, if you do the wrap, and you do a partial falling stance, then you kind of come up, and then a partial falling stance on this side. Again, you could proceed to the next move. So that would be a easy version of that same move. Again, I'll do both so you can see the difference. And you'll be able to see that the intended flow is kept intact, but not affected by the limitations of doing just that partial falling stance. So again, the move originally looks like this, where we're doing the wrap, and then jumping into the other falling stance. So the modified version would look like this. So although it's not as flamboyant, it keeps the intended flow of the move. As we get into other types of moves that people are having difficulty with, that's going to be the essence of how you modify your form to keep the intended flow of the form and yet be able to change it for your own needs. In the video that I did where I was doing the Tai Chi in the 4x6 mat, that's a pretty extreme example of how I modified the Guanping Tai Chi form to suit the need of that exercise, keeping it on that 4x6 mat. And we'll do a whole nother video on all those modifications to the moves I did in the form, but in the particular form, coming back to the falling stance, from here, I needed the space uh, in front of me so I could do the next moves. So instead of coming down and then coming up into the crane, and where I would have to do the golden cock stands on one leg and take a few steps, I didn't have that space. I modified it by here, after the single whip, going down. And I came back to this position here to come up into the crane so that I would reserve that space. You can go back and look at that video. I leave a link right here so you can go and watch that video and look at all the modifications I did to keep this form within that space. And essentially, I'm bringing that in because it comes to your own understanding of the form and how you need to adjust it for whatever your limitations you have, whether it be the space that you're working out in, your physical limitations or whatever. That's when it's okay to change the form, because again, the form is your own understanding of the Kung Fu, and it's totally your personal rendition of that form. If you're teaching, then it becomes a little bit different because you want to keep the form as it was taught through the centuries intact. And so again, when I'm teaching, I try to teach the full falling stance and the full manner of movement out of the falling stance, just for keeping the tradition. But again, if you're just doing your Tai Chi for yourself and it's your own personal rendition and your own understanding of the Tai Chi or Kung Fu, whatever form that you're doing, then it's really okay to modify the form to your needs. In the Tai Chi form, it comes 3 times, and one is like, again, from here, dropping down, and then coming up into golden cock stands on one leg. And then it comes from here, turn around, chop opponent with fists, and it comes at the end out of single whip, where you drop down, and then you punch, and turn around. So there's only 3 times that you're encountering the falling stance in the Guanping Tai Chi form. In Guanping Tai Chi staff form, it's only 1 time at the very end where you come here and you do the turn. And again, it's easy to modify that into a partial falling stance. So really, if you're just doing the Tai Chi, it shouldn't be too much of a problem modifying that into a partial stance from the single whip. And just come down as low as you can, come forward into golden cock stance on one leg. If you're here and you do the turn, chop opponent with this, it's very easy to just step back and go down as low as you can. Same with from here, single whip, just go down low and then step up. So your inability to do the full falling stance shouldn't affect your Guanping Tai Chi too much, nor the staff. Only in the Shaolin, and of course, if you're doing the Shaolin, you would have progressed up to the Tan Tui, and you would have like developed a fairly good falling stance just through that fundamental training. But again, as we get older, um, we'll have to modify that so we can continue doing the form. And the video of Sifu doing the Chatran on that small stage was really a good video to see how he actually modified his Shaolin to fit that stage, but also at that time he was like getting up in years, and I think his mobility was starting to deteriorate a little bit. So he modified it, and not knowing what the full, fancy up and down form really looks like, you would notice the difference. So, yeah, let's keep doing kung fu as you get older, and just adjust your form to your best capabilities of your mobility and your flexibility and your strength. Again, it's pretty important to keep pushing the strength factor and the mobility factor as much as you can as you get old, because we all start to deteriorate, and without trying to keep that flexibility, it just goes downhill trend. And so you just have to know your limitations and work with whatever you can. So good luck. Thank you.